Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins, and I want to tell you all about my show, the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we do a thorough analysis on the biggest issues and trends within the pro wrestling industry. We talk a lot about pro wrestling media, we talk a lot about fan culture and wrestling's place within general pop culture, and we talk about the broader influences that are shaping the way we discuss and analyze the pro wrestling industry. We've had some of the brightest minds in the pro wrestling intelligentsia on the show, including WrestleNomics host Brandon Thurston, both Rich Craich and Joe Lanza from the Flagship Wrestling Podcast, Trevor Dame from the Through the Years podcast, and a whole lot more. This isn't a show for hot takes. It's not a show recapping the latest episode of television. This is a show focusing on the biggest topics in pro wrestling and doing a deep dive on the real stories behind the surface level analysis you might find elsewhere. The Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a try. Thanks.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate, Rewind and Rewatch, celebrating 25 years of the Dragon System. This time we are talking about Friday LA Extreme Night. We are members of Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on all podcast platforms and applications under the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, or in our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed in all podcast catchers and applications. You can follow us on Twitter, X at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You can click the red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts, it's your pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside, as always, your other host, Case Lowe. And Case, we were talking right before we got on air. I have been basically locked inside with Pudge for the last 72 hours because somehow the New Mexico, Arizona monsoons have moved to Texas. And it's been wet and cool, weirdly. How have you been, bud?
Well, if you're stuck inside for any further day or days, I have a viewing suggestion for you.
What is that?
So I had the last week off of work, as we typically take the week before Labor Day off, and I had some time. Obviously, College Football 25 was my priority, but I also wanted a wrestling viewing project while I was home, while I had more time than I usually do. And after years of wanting to explore it, and more so just wanting to understand it and the impact that it had, I sat down last week, and thank you to not directly a friend of the show, but a friend of everybody, Roy Lucier. I began watching AAA, not from the beginning, but from the beginning of 1993, so about a half year into their existence. Mike, what is your level of familiarity with young Laparca?
I mean, 93 would have been right as he dropped, or right after he dropped the Carice La Momoa gimmick, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, everything that I've seen in AAA has been full-on Laparca, now Lapark, as we know and love him.
Well, like, as the staring down the 40s Attitude Era kid I am, it basically, my Laparca and LA Park viewing mainly starts with WCW.
Okay, that's kind of what I assumed. It was same boat for me. You know, I really only know him as a fun WCW wrestler who had the best WCW Dragon System match on an episode of Nitro, and then the Roosh stuff from the mid-2010s, which, you know, even I, at the time, not a Lucha enjoyer, not a Lucha viewer, certainly got sucked into the hype of that, certainly enjoyed a handful of the bouts that they had with one another. But I really primarily, I don't want to say that I recognize him as a meme more than anything, but I was entirely unfamiliar with anything he had done pre-WCW. And I have a few takeaways from watching early AAA that I want to talk about, because I can mold them into a take on modern day Dragongate by the end of it. But bar none, my biggest takeaway, and I've watched everything from the first TV of 1993 through right before we started recording. I finished off the televised edited version of the inaugural Triple Mania, so the end of April. So I've done a quarter of the year. My takeaway, number one with a bullet, is, oh my God, Young Laparca is so much better than I've ever heard anybody give him credit for. This is something you need to carve time out for and watch this guy in the ring with Ray, in the ring with Psychosis, in the ring with Heavy Metal. He is, I don't want to say as good as Ray, but I promise you he's not much worse.
And you're talking 93 Ray, too.
Yes,
So,
yes.
I mean, practically still a teenager, I think.
If he wasn't 16 when he debuted, he was 18. But I mean, he looks like a 13-year-old in the ring. You know, it's
Sure,
the early stuff with him. It's so interesting. And this is one of the other things I want to bring up is like, you know, Dave doesn't seem to ever talk about it. So I was surprised when I ran through a bunch of the not only Hamada footage that's available a few years ago, but a lot of the Hamada Universal stuff, his promotion in Japan. Dave was watching that stuff in real time, and Dave was very complimentary of it and into the promotion while it was a thing, especially while Asai was there. And it's very interesting having the background of those matches and the things that Hamada was doing, and Silver King and El Tejano, and Asai while he was there, and Santo while he's in Japan. It's very interesting having that background and then watching these AAA trios matches, because Dave gives, I think it's the second Mexico City show that AAA did. It's at the very end of January. He gives that tag 5 stars, and it's Ray and Psychosis and Heavy Metal, and it's, you know, it's the AAA group of guys that you would come to expect that Dave raved about. And the Hamada 6-mans from that time, 90, 91, 92, I think are so much better than the early, and again, I'm in early 93, the early AAA 6-mans, because we recognize the pattern of those Hamada 6-mans turned into Michinoku Pro matches, which turned into Toryumon matches, which turned into Dragongate matches. The AAA trios matches are, and I say this complimentary, but they're disasters. They're a total mess. There's a million things happening. Pinfalls don't count. Certain falls, I don't know how. Sometimes we jump from the first fall to the second fall. It's all super confusing, but the athleticism of Ray in particular, and then Psychosis, and then Fuerza Guerrera are off the charts. And it's really interesting to watch, knowing that even by 93, there was the foundational understanding of Lucharesu and everything that Hamada brought from Mexico back to Japan. And these AAA trios matches do not follow that format at all. I understand why in 1993 Dave might have raved about them, but they really, at least so far, do not hold up to the degree that I was hoping they would, whereas the Hamada stuff really does, and is arguably underrated.
I feel like, and again, blind spot, so when I'm wrong, I admit I'm wrong here. I feel like that everything I've like read and consumed about like that time period where Pena leaves EMLL and then starts AAA and all of that, you don't necessarily hear about, other than of course that Dave match, you don't necessarily hear about the work rate. You're hearing about the characters, about Pena being like this great booker and character creator. Yes. I feel like, and I guess for me, part of my not getting into that, and I love a train wreck, so like, especially I like everything happening wrestling, so I could that does appeal to me in that manner. But at least I feel like for people who don't get deep into it, the whole story being that it was Pena getting his characters going, and then really when Ray started becoming a little bit older and all of that, at least like 94, 95, that's when AAA really kind of came online. At least that was my understanding.
That lines up with what I'm watching, because it's hard watching something with 30 years of hindsight when the only thing you've ever known about early AAA is how everybody talks about how revolutionary it was. So you can't watch it with an untrained eye. You just assume that everything you're watching is revolutionary to some degree. It's a lot like the experience that I had watching ECW stuff for the first time, where some of it might not make any sense to me. Some of it, if it was positioned as another promotion, I might go, oh, this sucks. But in the same way that, ECW was, oh, they changed everything, everybody copied them. I have that, I don't know if sensation is the right word, but I have that feeling watching this early AAA stuff where, you could just use context clues, Mike, of, think about the late 80s UWA and late 80s, early 90s EMLL stuff that you've watched. And then if you spend 5 minutes on a AAA show from 1993, you're going to go, wow, this is different. There's a lot of things happening. These entrances are as long as matches they feel like sometimes, but man, I just can't take my eyes off of some of these guys. So what I've been doing is, and I hope this is interesting to somebody, because I've really had fun going through this footage, and I have no other place to put my thoughts, but I've been watching all the main events from the TV, and then whatever else looks interesting. So that's anytime Santo's on TV, I'm going to watch that. Anytime Ray's on TV, I'm going to watch that. There have been some mask matches that have taken place. There was a Blue Panther Volcano feud that I thought was dreadful from an in-ring perspective other than the mask match. So I watched some of the build of that, which was terrible, and then the mask match paid off, and it was at least halfway decent. But it's main events and then anything I find to be interesting. And as I said at the beginning, La Parka is the guy whose stock has raised the most, and it kind of makes me want to go through his entire career and see what I think of it, because I at no point in time ever realized he was athletic as he was and was as fast as he was, and obviously he still has the charisma in 1993 that he has now, so that's been a really eye-opening experience. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and then we'll move on to Dragongate stuff because we got a bunch to talk about, but I think you'll appreciate this because you famously have had controversial takes on wrestlers over the age of 50 in the past.
And absolutely, and I stand true to those takes.
Of course. Yeah. I'm not saying, trust me, I'm not saying you're wrong. Any opinion J.R. Goldberg has is the wrong opinion, so you're on the right side of history. But watching Perro Aguayo in early AAA has been such a rewarding experience, because a lot of the TVs, 1 week it'll be Conan and a 6-man tag, and there have been some where it's Conan and Eddie and Sato on the same team against the heels, and then the next week it'll be Perro with Eddie and Sato against the heels. The difference in quality, and I'm not breaking any news here by saying Conan's not a very good wrestler, but oh my god, some of these Conan 6-mans, they are so bad that you have to watch them, just because I would argue that level of awful doesn't really exist anymore. The floor for Major League Wrestling on the whole has been raised a little bit since 1993, but these
I don't know, Case. There's a lot of people who are impressed by very slow pump handle drivers. I've realized over the last
the adults who enjoy NXT are a separate breed. They belong on their own island. That's not for me to judge. But the Perro stuff is so interesting. Again, if you're well versed in lucha, it's going to be like no duh. It'd be like me listening to a wrestling podcast and the two guys going, hey, you know who I really like? Shingo Takagi. I'd be sitting there like, yeah, of course. I've been talking about this for years. But the Perro stuff is so interesting because it is so obvious that he was born to do this on a level where not having Perro in wrestling history would have just been a disservice to this entire industry. It would have been a crime if he would have not become a pro wrestler. It's interesting. Dave writes in The Observer after the first Triple Mania, which, I think had 48,000 paid, and they reported 60,000, whatever. But the quality of wrestling on that show is not great other than the Perro mask match. And Dave's point was, everybody on the show was nervous except for Perro, because he had wrestled in front of crowds, maybe not that large before, but by that point in his career, he had gone through everything. And in the same way that you and I appreciate old man Tenryu as much as we do young Tenryu, and we love 50-plus Masaki Mochizuki, even if the difference between 50-plus Mochi and 25-year-old Mochi isn't exactly that extreme, Perro should be lumped into that conversation of the great old man wrestlers of all time, because there's a vast difference between him in 1993 doing what he's doing and with the early 80s Perro footage we have. And, sadly, we don't really have anything before that, maybe a match or two from the 70s, but it's really just 80s stuff that we have. But you watch him in 93 and you're like, this guy is a master of his craft to a degree. While I still think Ric Flair is a better pro wrestler overall than Perro Aguayo, watching Perro in AAA at this point really is a knock on Flair's career, because Flair was never as good of an old man wrestler as Perro Aguayo was. Like post 93 Flair, it's really few and far between for what the value is there. But if you watch Pero in 1993 on a week in, week out basis, oh my God, what a gift it is. I mean, the charisma is unbelievable. The brawling is unbelievable. He hangs with the younger guys in some of their fast-paced sequences. I can't say enough good things about going back and watching Pero Aguayo matches.
Yeah, when we've done GWE stuff and Pero pops up, he's always been the person, and a lot of that we've done, like, and now it's like 3 years ago, was around Hamada and Babyface, people like that. And so it's like, oh wow, this is footage from the early 80s when, I mean, he's still not even 40 at that point. But I feel like it's something that within him, and I've seen some of that kind of time period Pero, but he just pops. And I feel like that with AAA at that time, you just had a lot of things. And again, blind spot. But from what I've read and studied, it's just everything is popping, and you needed to have someone like that there at that time.
Yes, I entirely concur. I would highly recommend people watch the Pero and Mascara Anya 2000 match from the first Triple Mania show if you get the chance to. Again, the TV's not blow away. You know, I've gone through 4 months of it, and I've got a handful of 4-star matches. You know, there's a really good minis match in April that's Cage Match has listed on the MASH guide. Anything with Eddie and Sato is really, really worth watching. You know, at this point, like the last Sato stuff I watched was when I was going through the early Mystico stuff. So 10 years after what we're talking about, basically, 10, 12 years. And by that point, Sato's knees were gone, and he was great, but he was much older. And then you watch him in 1993 when he's still relatively healthy, and just the speed and grace that he carries around the ring is something else. So I don't know if I'm going to put together a GWE list for 2026. I know I ranked Sato in the top 50 when we did it in 2021, but that is somebody who, and again, I'm not breaking news here. It just took me a long time to get around to some of this lucha stuff where it's like, all right, this is probably a top 30 guy of all time, because the floor there is so high and the ceiling is some of the best stuff to ever come out of Mexico. So it's been very enjoyable. Roy has all of the TV for 93 and 94, and I think he has most of 95. So when I have the time, I'm going to keep on going through this, and hopefully somebody found this interesting. I might just start writing thoughts in the Discord instead of taking up 15 minutes on this podcast. But it's an exciting viewing project. It's really, really fun. I would recommend it if you are looking for something new and something different.
Yeah, and I feel like especially getting to see someone like Peña's vision, like, kind of play out in a launch. And I think that when you look at, like, launches of promotions, really, and I mean, it's something that we talk about a lot with, like, the January 31st, 1999 King of Dragon show and previous Rewind and Rewatches, like, just how different it was than what was being put on at that time.
Yes.
And I always find, like, the first 24 months of a promotion really fascinating in that regard. That, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get as deep as you are into it, but at least the first few, like, Triple Manias, I feel like are something, especially hearing all this about La Park. You know, that gets me. Yeah. I was always very for La Park and Hall of Fame talk. So I'm glad.
That's been a big eye opener, because I didn't realize, like, I knew he was a fun wrestler in WCW. I didn't realize how good he was, though. I thought he kind of topped out at fun, and now I'm realizing that's incorrect. So he's been, an absolute pleasure. The Santo and Eddie tag team is funny because, you know, Santo is Santo, and Eddie has this horrible singlet on, and he's not quite Eddie Guerrero yet, but he's still very good. Heavy Metal, who is Negro Casas's brother, I believe.
Yes, yeah, he's part of the Casas family.
He's been awesome, and I don't, I know, at the very least, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but I know he has quite the history of life, a lot of miles on those tires at this point. But in 1993, oh my God, I mean, he's right there with Ray and Psychosis in terms of speed and athleticism and being, engaging in these multi-man matches. So it's been a big eye-opening experience. You know, it reaffirms the fact that I don't like Blue Panther as much as other people do. La Parca has been a huge winner. Pero has been a huge winner. And Ray's work in Mexico has never fully jumped out to me, but I think watching it like this, I think I can finally start to appreciate what Ray did in Mexico pre-WCW. So that's my spiel. Sorry that took up so much time, but
No worries, bud.
It's been a very fun project so far.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I'm just going off the top of my head. Like you're still about 13 months before the When Worlds Collide show.
Yes, exactly. So, and I final note on this, because I wanted to get to this and tie it into Dragongate and really just Japan in general. But I think Dragongate, for so long, it was such a strength. It actually kind of ties into the rewind and rewatch stuff where, Dragongate for such a long time, and maybe because I'm confounded by some of the naysayers on contemporary Dragongate, and when I see those same people complain about New Japan and Noah, I just want to be like, well, it's like the old Chikara ads. It's like, well, there is an alternative. There's a promotion that is kind of kicking ass in Japan this year, but outside of Shun occasionally and Yamato over the last few months, I do think they struggle presenting guys as more than just wrestlers on the roster, but as something a little bit bigger. And I think that's an issue throughout all of Japan. Dragongate, just for whatever reason, I mean, financially is the reason, but they're just lacking on a production level right now that New Japan is not. And because of the backing that Noah has, they are not. In All Japan, because of the promotion that they are, they can kind of get away with being a little bit more sparse. And with Dragongate, I think a lot of people are expecting something that looks a little bit more like 1993 AAA. And right now, Dragongate is not looking like that. And maybe that is a tick that some people have, where they just want lasers and greased up muscles and
CIMA.
And CIMA, because some people can't ever move on. And they want, like, if you go back and look at 2003 TV, some of these Hakata Star Lanes entrances, it's madness. It's almost like watching a Beatles show, and the atmosphere in Japan across the board is just not that right now. But I also don't think Dragongate is doing themselves any favors from a presentation standpoint, which is a bummer, because they don't have to be 1993 AAA, and they don't have to be overproduced like a lot of North American, or specifically United States wrestling is right now. But it feels like there could be some middle ground between that, where guys come across as bigger stars than they actually are.
And not to harp on this point, I feel like that in some ways Dragongate's actually taken a step back in the presentation.
Very much so. And that, my understanding of that is that it's purely a financial issue.
Right.
They are a true independent company, but it's noticeable. The Dangerous Gate show was a great house and a great show, and the building looked horrible. And that is something that I think for a lot of people, they have a hard time overcoming.
And I mean, even not particularly this episode of Rewind and Rewatch, but I mean, when we've looked into the past, basically up into 2018, what was the big thing that was said about Dragongate main event matches?
What was that?
That you had this circuit, you had this pomp, you had the national anthems. It felt like Dreamgate matches felt like something different, and that's been gone. And I feel like that's one of the easiest things when we talk about even a little thing about Dragongate that's not even really monetary, that has kind of gone away. And it's just the presentation of it has changed, and sometimes not for the better. And I think that that's an easy thing to point to as a change that I don't think has succeeded.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a generational thing. And it's, Dragongate's not being run by Gen Z people, so this isn't a one-to-one comparison. I'm just purely theorizing as an American, and I'm putting my dumb American thoughts onto a Japanese company. But I deal with that at my job sometimes, where I'm introduced to new bands, and it's why aren't you guys acting like a band? Why aren't you guys looking and doing the things that you should do? And Dragongate has gone away from being a bombastic wrestling company, which they are. And sometimes it's just you would just want to knock on their door and be like, hey, what's going on in there? You guys know how to do this. Yeah, there's been a blueprint for this. Why are you guys not just doing what you did in the past?
Yeah, why aren't you turning out the lights and buildings like Yokohama Budokan? And why aren't you doing national anthems before Dreamgate matches?
Exactly.
Easy things like that. But to kind of move us on towards our bigger topic today, Case, you suggested this privately. We're kind of springing this on everyone. I think that this is something that if you're someone who has who's interested about the time period that we are talking about, you need to go back to episode 1 of our original Rewind and Rewatch project right before I opened the historical gate 2009. This episode will kind of serve case. I know that I play a lot more of these kind of games than you are. Have you ever heard of the phrase Gaiden before?
No.
It is something within, especially like Japanese games, that it is kind of a side story. It's kind of a sequel. Like, I know you've heard of the Yakuza series. They put out a Gaiden game that kind of filled in the blanks between one of the main series games and the next one. And it's like treated as like, okay, now for the next forever along this game is we're going to tell this little bit of a side story. I feel like this week's episode kind of is a side story before the overall DGUSA series in a weird way.
I think this show made me hate Dragongate USA. I think this show was a better version of Dragongate in America than anything Dragongate USA ever did. That's not to say that Dragongate USA didn't have better shows than this, but
better matches.
Better matches, although, boy, are there some matches on this show that are phenomenal.
We're going to take some time to talk about one of the guys that you mentioned very quickly in your spiel. We're going to talk about some Shingoism in here.
We're going to talk about some Saito and Susumu Yokosuka too. My goodness. But I don't know. I love this show. It's something I watched before. I hadn't seen it in a few years. And at the start of the year, when we talked about doing these monthly, doing some sort of throwback show every month, at some point during this month, we'll do Absolute Amente 2002, and we'll do a really proper breakdown of Darkness Dragon versus Dragon Kid in the same way of like the M2K episode from February. But I really wanted to talk about this show because I knew I liked it. And then I did all the notes for this, and then I watched the show again, and then I started thinking about this era, and I started thinking about, to steal a Bill Simmons phrase, all of the sliding glass door moments from this show and how this could have been a blueprint for a radically different Dragongate. And then on top of that, the show was fantastic. I said in the Discord, it is the hidden gem of the Dragongate library. I don't think a lot of people have seen this show, and that is a bummer. So the link to this show will be in the episode description. It'll be on the Discord. It's something that if you've never seen this show, go and watch it and then come back to us because we have the timeline at the start, and then we'll review the show, and then we actually have some timeline stuff at the end of the episode after the show review that I think is super important to talk about as well.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about this is, I don't know what version we kind of came across with this. This is not exactly the DVD version that's going to go up there. There's one match I'm pretty certain did not make the DVD that is on this show that we have. It's really a fun kind of testament. It's also, I feel like, if we are like talking about like this show and what DGUSA would be, we got a lot closer to what Dragongate is on this show, especially representative of what Dragongate was in the summer of 2008 here.
Put a pin in that because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But let's go to the timeline, and let me start. I'll throw this big picture question to you. Independent wrestling in 2008. What comes to mind when I throw that idea at you?
For me, I loved independent wrestling in 2008 and 2009. For me, I think that this is one of those situations where, for me and wrestling, I know you know this case because I've like talked about it. I really was kind of limited by what I had available for me up until I got to college and had LimeWire, and that really, and I went to college in 2004. Case that really opened my mind to everything, especially with pro wrestling. And as it advanced over, like, I guess for me, like this basically coincides with like my undergraduate tenure. I feel like that when I got into 2008, and it's particularly this time we're talking about, I'm thinking about like PWG is not where it was, but it still kind of felt like an all-star game in a lot of different ways. But it was like the big company on the West Coast. You had IWA Mid-South that was coming off their peak, but still was something where when there was a Smart Mark video sale case, and it was always buy 3, get 1 free, I would have to get the TPI. Like you would have that, and then really, and a little bit to my shame, I was already into Dragongate into 2008. Like that was already in there. But you know what was the promotion I probably watched the most of? And you made reference to it a little bit ago. It was Chikara. So,
oh yeah.
But like when you talk about that time period, it actually makes me really sad for where we are in independent wrestling in 2024. Like, just because there was a lot of everything. If you're a deathmatch person, you had CZW, and that was pretty much that nonstop, and including what happens in the various IWA promotions as well. But you had really throughout the country, really maybe except the greater South, unless you're someone who was really into Wildside at that point, you really, like, all points of the continental US felt like it was breaming with indie wrestling.
Yeah,
and you had Ring of Honor. You had Ring of Honor.
Ring of Honor. And, you know, I watched all this stuff in hindsight, but I consider myself to be extremely well-versed in not only 2008 Ring of Honor, which, you know, we're talking about Gabe's Last Stand, and I happen to think 2008 Ring of Honor is a really interesting promotion where Gabe was trying a lot of things, and I think a lot of those things worked. It's a very high ceiling in-ring year for that promotion. It's Danielson as, you know, post-champion, really continuing to be the workhorse on those shows. It's a great year for Austin Aries. It's a great year for Go Shiozaki, who comes in. It's Cena and Generico, and it's Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black having their great feud. The Briscoes are obviously still involved. You know, Nigel is there. Nigel is doing great things. It's a great year for the promotion there. We don't have to get off on a huge diatribe about 2008 IWA Mid-South, but unfortunately, I'm super well versed in that as well. When I think about the hours that I have on Earth and the fact that I have watched so many 2008 IWA Mid-South shows, it is so disheartening to think about. But let me tell you, they used Too Cold Scorpio as a regular that year, and there is a Too Cold Scorpio Roderick Strong match that is a delight.
Oh my God, I remember that match.
That is
match
good
rocked.
Stuff. Yeah. It's
a shame that Too Cold Scorpio did not show up in DGUSA.
To say the least. And it's only 1 year apart, which is the crazy thing. You would have thought it was 30 years the way that he wrestled on that DGUSA show. So you have IWA Mid-South. I really enjoy Ring of Honor from that year. And this is the start, and we really have to talk about PWG to understand how this Dragongate in LA show came to be. This is not the golden era of PWG, but they are starting to find something special on the West Coast as not just a West Coast indie, but as a featured attraction across the United States. And, it's interesting to me that last week on the flagship, Rich and Joe were talking about Sid and how, sometimes they get pigeonholed as these guys that only like flips and only like high spots and head drops and 2.9 kickouts and whatever. And they were both, raving about the career of Sid, even though, he was the best bad wrestler of all time. And they made comments about specifically the PWG style. And I was so disheartened to hear that, not that they said it, but just that whether I want to admit it or not, by the end of PWG's prominence, there was a PWG style. And that is disheartening as somebody that loves going back and watching 2009, 2010, 2011 PWG. And then by the summer of 2012, when I got into indie wrestling, from 2012 until 2014, really the BOLA that we just passed the 10-year anniversary of, I lived for those DVDs. I would pre-order them as soon as they were available. I would get them day one. I would consume them over and over again. And at that point, it was an all-star show. It was a lot of Ring of Honor versus Dragongate USA stuff that you couldn't get anywhere else, or that if it happened anywhere else, it wouldn't be as good. But it still had the charm of they're going to book B-Boy, and they're going to book Willie Mack. And for 8 months, Drake Younger is going to be the biggest wrestler in this promotion.
Brandon, the new guy.
Yeah. It was just, it was a special time. And by the time that the 3-night Bolas returned, and you started bringing in the Lucha Underground guys, and you started bringing in all the UK talent, those shows were great. I can't look you in the eye and tell you those were bad shows, but it's a bummer that when some people think of PWG, they think of Donovan Dijak, and that they don't think of 2011, 2012, 2013 PWG, which, although it didn't have as big of marquee names, was far more interesting and far more special, and just a really special thing. But the groundwork for that is laid. It goes back to BOLA 2006, and that is, we're talking post Supercard of Honor at this point, which is really important to note. So Blood Generation versus Do Fixer has already happened, And that is when PWG dips their toes into the Dragongate pool, and you get CIMA, and you get Dragon Kid, and you get Genki Horiguchi and Jack Evans in that bola, and that starts a relationship that through Akira Tozawa's excursion was an incredibly strong relationship where, yes, Dragongate guys could go to America on WrestleMania weekend, whether it was Chicago or Detroit or Orlando, and they could have their showcase matches. But a few different times throughout the year, they were also going to go to the West Coast. And I think that has been lost to history a little bit just because there's not the specific PWG Dragongate match. I would certainly make the argument that Shingo versus El Generico from 2009 is that match, but you don't have the obvious Blood Generation versus Do Fixer thing. And so I don't know if people now realize just how integral PWG was into Dragongate finding an identity within America.
Yeah, and for me, at least, you know what I'm going to immediately go to, right? It's 2010, it's Akira Tozawa, and it's Chris Hero. I mean, Akira Tozawa mentioned this on Twitter this weekend that match over Bola 2010 changed his life. But where you had this relationship with ROH that we will talk about, like, later on in this timeline, and also after all of this, we'll talk about the conclusion of that relationship. You also had this in you had this in California, and I feel like that although you got to have like the name brand thing, it's like we're talking about 2008 case. You know what I forgot to interject when we were talking about this? I was at WrestleMania week in 2008. I saw the Dragongate guys there. My favorite match of that weekend was Cinerco versus Cinerco versus Muscle Outlaws.
Yeah, they did Speed Muscle, and they did Shingo and Hulk that weekend.
Yeah, Shingo and Hulk. That was an incredible one. You could, if you go through, you could actually see me very visibly on camera as Mark Briscoe broke my chair during the Briscoes versus Age of the Fall match. Like you could actually like outright like it was one of those things that like at that time really like spoke out to you. But when you look at how Ring of Honor kind of treated Dragongate and how throughout that relationship, it was a lot about like see the spectacle, see like the big match, and then like okay, we have Shingo coming through, we have BB Hulk and Yamato for a couple months, and you compare that to how, at least with how PWG at that time in 2008 and 2006 really starts to like pull in the parts from different parts of the wrestling world in a way like that way predates 2014 boom. I mean, you're talking about people coming in from Pacific Northwest. You're talking about Dragongate people coming in. I mean, like they brought in they attempted to bring in El Blazer. Like this was not a promotion that was necessarily booking people's friends or people off recommendation. This was a promotion that went out and found people at that time. And I feel like that Dragongate throughout that has always been like kind of the thing that PWG found. I mean, I was at Bola 2015, and the responses, because like Akira Tozawa still would show up in PWG occasionally. Whenever Tozawa was there, he was the spark plug that started the fire. That I fully believe that if it wasn't for Tozawa and Hero, the PWG boom would not have happened. Like that was the match that got everyone to pay attention to it, but it had those 3 years, give or take, of groundwork to make it to that point.
Yeah, it's stuff like the Tozawa stuff that coincided with, you know, I'll from my perspective share. So like 2012 is when I get into indie wrestling, and Kevin Steen at the time is the biggest star in indie wrestling. And if you even had a foundational understanding of just the landscape at the time, you're aware of Ring of Honor, you're aware of PWG, you're aware of what Gabe has going on. If you would catch any interview with Steen during that year, and this is him as Ring of Honor champion, you know, you ask him about Ring of Honor, he kind of shrug his shoulders and be like, well, you know, Jim's there. It's just, you know, it's a whole thing. Well, what about PWG? Oh, PWG is the greatest place on earth. It's the place that made me fall back in love with wrestling. So you had this higher and higher ceiling that you were reaching seemingly month after month with Hero and Tozawa, and then the return of Super Dragon, and then the Super Smash Brothers come in and blow everybody's mind, and then Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly come in and blow everybody's mind. And then you also have just this evangelical praise that was entirely warranted at the time that, you know, by the time I got my first PWG DVD, you know, it was like finding the Holy Grail. It was just, I had never seen anything like this. I was going to say this for later, but you started talking about it now in terms of the way that Gabe saw Dragongate compared to the way that the PWG crew, which I will largely attribute, and I will issue a correction if I'm wrong, because I think people listening might know, but Excalibur and Super Dragon are the guys that I will attribute this success to. If you know anything about Gabe, and unfortunately I do think I speak Gabe on a very high level, it was a DVD product for him, and he would tell you, good angles and good storylines don't sell DVDs. Great matches do. And so he saw Dragongate as a way of, these guys can come in with no story, with no build. They can come in and have great matches. And I don't think Gabe ever understood storytelling in the same way that Dragongate did. Whereas if you look at the history of PWG, they understood Pac before anybody else. They helped the Young Bucks get into Dragongate because they understood the Bucks before anybody else. It's funny because PWG became the promotion that didn't tell stories, but from 2006 to 2011, there weren't many promotions better at telling stories than they would. And
oh my God, the Hiro Tozawa storyline where Hiro would not let him go without having one final match.
I know. It's amazing they abandoned that at some point. It's a real bummer because there was a point in time where they were telling stories almost as like a hybrid between your vintage All Japan and vintage Noah stuff, where it was all in the ring, but it had this heart and this spirit that Dragongate had, and it really became a perfect marriage for those two promotions. And I will probably say this multiple times throughout this podcast, but the thing I said on the last Dragongate USA show that we did, which was now 3.5 years ago, I think about quite often, and that is that, with all due respect to Gabe, because I have nothing against him personally, and I'm very glad that Dragongate USA existed. Everything that Dragongate does well to make themselves Dragongate are the things that Gabe struggles with. And so I think once Gabe got through the first 4 shows of Dragongate USA, where there were all of these great matches, and then he had to start doing Dragongate, he could never figure out the tone. He could never figure out how to be Dragongate, and that's what makes this LA show so fascinating, is that it's like you're watching a Dragongate show adapted to America. Mike, it feels like you're watching a TV pilot for what if Dragongate was on American TV, and you never got that with Dragongate USA. It never once felt like that.
Considering that was the pay-per-view product, too.
Yes. That's a very good point. So, with all that being said, I think that's a good overview of what the indie landscape looked at the time. Let's go to the timeline. We start January 6, 2008 at a PWG show, of course. This is All-Star Weekend 6, Night 2. A very good show. I would recommend watching the Age of the Fall versus Young Bucks match, because I believe that is the specific match that got the Young Bucks booked in Dragongate. Also, El Generico versus Susumu Yokosuka, very good. But the main event of this show was Bryan Danielson and CIMA in their second singles match. Much like their first, it went to a time limit draw. And after the show, CIMA announces that Dragongate is going to come to America and run a show in 2008. That happens January 6th. 3 months later, on CIMA's Myspace page, we get confirmation where he announces on April 19th, 2008, that Dragongate is coming to LA and Hawaii in September, with details coming soon. And if you know CIMA, you know this is a big deal to get his mitts on anything in America. In the same way 2 weeks ago we talked about how, had Ultimo not left, in the same way that Dragongate in 2005 and 2006 flew in all of these American indie guys, I think Ultimo would have done that for the CMLL roster, but CIMA loved America, and CIMA wanted to break into this market really, really badly.
Yeah, and also, just so all the kids know out there, CIMA's Myspace was kind of like the thing at the time. Like, I followed CIMA.
I know this is before my time, but even I have a foundational understanding of this, very much so.
Yeah. And I'm just, like, that's how the deals were done. I'm imagining CIMA sliding into Nick Jackson's DMs on MySpace going,
that's how he was booked.
Oh, I know. And he didn't believe it the first time.
I know. Yeah. I mean, that's, Pac, same way. CIMA used to MySpace message Kevin Steen and be like, get me in contact with Ricochet. And Steen would be like, no, here's Pac instead. Like, you want Pac, not Ricochet. And this is 3 or 4 years before Ricochet actually went to Japan.
Well, CIMA might have wanted Ricochet based off of Chuck Taylor music videos starting in 2005. Which is like my favorite random CIMA anecdote was that apparently he knew of Ricochet and the double moonsault way before even Chikara.
I love that. That's good for CIMA. I should note a lot of this stuff has been preserved through the old PWG forum, which is still a working website. You can't
BB code, man, it exists.
Yeah, so like I went to Web Archive to try to find some of this stuff, and some of the pages that I needed weren't archived, but then I hit a Google and it led me to the active PWG forum website, which is great. I would recommend it. It's prowrestlinggorilla.com/forum. Read the Super Dragon Q&A and learn all about how he almost booked Bryan Danielson versus Kurt Angle in 2006. But a lot of the MySpace stuff and some of the messages come from there, which I think is interesting. I have not used that as a source before, so that's exciting. So in April, we get confirmation that Dragongate's going to come to America. We go to Japan on May 14th, 2008. The Young Bucks debut in Japan. They debut in Korakuen Hall. They lose to Ryo Saito and Susumu Yokosuka in a 15-minute match. This show is famous. This is May 14th, 2008. Like I said, this is Shingo turning on BB Hulk. Shingo does the dance, but then he doesn't do the dance. And then we get this crazy Dragongate main event of Shingo, Yamato, and Gamma versus Doi, Yoshino, and Hulk for the Dragongate belts. Mike, this is one of the most iconic moments in Dragongate history.
I know, this is the Dragongate version of when Kimono Wanalea danced atop the ECW arena. Like, I still have fond memories of how Cyber Kong looked like as BB Cyber. But this angle basically sets up the remainder of Shingo Takagi's tenure in the Dragon system. Like, the next 10 years do not happen in that way without that turn. And respectively, for BB Hulk, this was kind of like the pushing him towards a little bit more of the upper card for where he was at, and especially with how the summer would play out. That turn was the impetus for him to kind of no longer being like the Typhoon or Paz Hearts promising youngster. Like, this was like, okay, New Hazard broke up in a very traumatic way. Where does BB Hulk go here? Well, Muscle Outlaws was falling apart at that point, and Naruki Doi and Masato Yoshino were more than willing to hop in there and form the nucleus for what later that month would become World 1.
I think for Hulk and maybe for Yoshino, people associate the most with World 1 to this day. I think Doi, you got to go Mad Blanky or Berserk just because of the tag team with Yamato, but Doi Mad Blanky felt like a different animal. But when I think of Masato Yoshino, I don't think of the orange and black of Monster Express, and I don't think of the Italian connection. I think of World 1, and it's a broken record at this point, because whenever I go back and watch old BB Hulk footage, and then we talk about it on the show, I'm flabbergasted at how talented this era of BB Hulk in the silver and gray with the World 1 logo, at how talented this guy was. So you're setting up here, again, Real Hazard, which would pave the way for the next decade of Yamato's career. You have the Shingo versus Hulk feud, which had simmered. They wrestled in King of Gate 2005, and then they found partnership in New Hazard. This is the kickoff of what would become the most iconic feud in the promotion's history. And then you have the start of World 1. You have Tozawa Juku in the mix. This all paints a picture of where we are at in 2008 Dragongate, Mike.
Yeah, and I want to touch on the post-match thing, because this is like, we talk about the turn being like such a big thing, but I think like I lump in this segment, and my memory being what it is, I forgot that this segment happened immediately after this match. Naoki Tanizaki immediately, like as he's returning back to the promotion, he saves them, and then they call up at that time MCKZ, who was in Mexico, 12-hour time difference. It probably was like 5 a.m. when they called him, and they had him on speakerphone in front of Korakuen Hall.
This is the phone call angle.
Yeah, this is the phone call angle.
I didn't want to mention it because I wasn't 100% sure. If Shingo turning on Hulk is the most iconic moment in Dragongate history, this is like number 2 in terms of the most fun this promotion ever was Doi calling KZ on speakerphone in the middle of Korakuen Hall.
Yeah, and Casey's very much going, hey, oh, doy, yes, I'll join. I'll come back for that. And they would later, 2 weeks later, announce World One in front of the hometown crowd in Kobe Sambo Hall. And I feel like you touched on the Yoshino and Hulk kind of athletic peak there. Like for me, really, like going through this period, and maybe it is just like recency and me dreading the future, but God, Yoshino at this time.
Oh,
Like,
it's unbelievable.
yeah, absolutely. But like this is like one of those shows. I mean, like top to down, like this Corcoran Hall show. You have a really fun opener. I remember for like what made tape of this show, it was really good.
Yeah, I went back and watched the July 2008 Corkin, not the May one, but oh my God. Like look, I'm a little preoccupied with 1993 AAA right now, but I got to carve out some time to revisit some 2008 Dragongate that I hadn't seen in a while, because I was not prepared for the quality to be as high as it was. So
just get ready to buckle yourself in for a lot of Tsuzawajuku and Araiwa. Like you're in my happy place.
Do you remember this was on the Corkin that I watched. Do you remember the Yamato Stalker Ichikawa singles match?
God, Stalker got his ass just destroyed in that.
He did. So, okay. Well, let me do this now, because the June Corkin, CIMA at this point's out with a neck injury. CIMA hurts his neck. At that point, he'd been dealing with it for years. But Dead or Alive 2008 is the last time that he would wrestle on the bad neck. So he takes the rest of the month off, and then the idea was that at the June Corkin show, and he's Dreamgate champion at this point, that he would wrestle a dark exhibition match against Stalker Ichikawa to see how his neck felt. And his neck was in such bad shape that they actually had to cancel the match. So they do an angle where they cancel the match, and then Yamato and Real Hazard come out, and they beat down Ichikawa, and that sets up a singles match between Yamato and Ichikawa in July. And you're right, Yamato beats his ass, but he does it in the most entertaining way possible. So there's just a brief aside there that doesn't really tie into the LA show, whereas this does. And this is really important to note just in terms of the time period we're at, in one of the many sliding glass doors moments that I want to talk about. June 9th, 2008, Speed Muscle come to TNA, and they work the Motor City Machine Guns in what is one of the best American TV matches of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one that is still shared about whenever someone's talking about Speed Muscle, like to this point. And to be fair, like it is incredible. Like I can almost remember that match almost beat for beat in a way. Like I've seen it that many times. But you really you get to see in 2008 where Dragongate was really just like Ring of Honor, FIP, and PWG. They started to expand outwards at this time, and you had that with TNA with Speed Muscle.
It's something that is widely underreported, because outside of us, I don't know who.
I think I know what you're going to talk about, and it's reported wrongly when it is.
I don't know what you're going to say. Then you go ahead.
About the contract offer, and that people thought that it was Doi who didn't want to go, but it was actually Yoshino who wanted to stay.
Okay, so that's part of this. So I don't think people realize just how, for better or worse, TNA was involved with Dragongate in 2008 and 2009, really through Mania Weekend 2010, when you have the hard official Ring of Honor Dragongate USA split. That is when the TNA pressure alleviates. But in 2008, Dragongate made an offer to the Motor City Machine Guns to come in and win the Twin Gate belts and to be members of World One. And I don't know how widely known that is, but I have on very good authority that was the plan, that the Guns were going to come in, they were going to win the belts, they're going to be members of World One. This is right at the time, and the whole reason Speed Muscle come in is for the World X Cup, and this is right at the time where TNA decides we are going to be good, loyal, exclusive partners to New Japan Pro Wrestling, who at the time is not exactly lighting the world on fire. So they put the kibosh on the Guns coming to Dragongate. They say, guys, we'd feel much more comfortable if you work New Japan. New Japan's interested. You guys are going to do that instead of Dragongate. The other thing, and this plays off of what you were talking about, is TNA was blown away by Speed Muscle, and that, is, I think, widely known at this point. But even from people that worked for TNA at the time that I've talked to this match about are like, no, they were ready to bring them in on a full-time basis. And Doi was, as a big American wrestling fan, was far more interested than Yoshino was, but they felt like they couldn't go. They felt like they were loyal to Dragongate, and losing, World 1 was this like three-headed dog, and losing Doi and Yoshino and only leaving Hulk would have left the company in a very bad state. So Doi stayed, and that's just one of the ways that TNA got involved in Dragongate during this time period. But the Speed Muscle match is a big deal. It, to this day, is a big deal. It's one of the more iconic things TNA ever did, and I think it's one of the more infamous American TV wrestling matches.
Absolutely so.
So that leads us to June 14th, 2008. This comes from Ring of Honor, where they announced that they will be returning to Japan for 2 events in Tokyo at Differ Ariake on September 13th and September 14th. Ring of Honor says the first card will feature Dragongate wrestlers, and the second show will have cooperation from Pro Wrestling Noah, as well as some other independent Japanese wrestlers. Ring of Honor promises to bring over Nigel McGuinness, Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black, Roderick Strong, Bryan Danielson, the Briscoe Brothers, Austin Aries, and Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards of Sweet and Sour Incorporated, which I think is a funny talent list. And then they continue to say, last year's Live in Tokyo and Live in Osaka events were a success with the live crowd in Japan and the DVD buying audience. ROH officials want to thank all the fans for making another tour possible. We'll have more news on the talent in the coming months. So we're in June. Ring of Honor is hell-bent on breaking into the Japanese market in the same way that Dragongate really wanted to break into the American market, and we should just remember that going forward.
Yep. We'll touch on this later.
We will. June 29th, CIMA vacates the Dreamgate belt. This came after the hour-long Shingo versus BB Hulk match, which, if you've never seen, we don't have all 60 minutes, which is a travesty, but the most full version of it is on the Gaiora YouTube channel. It's been restored to crystal clear high definition. It's something that got uploaded a few months ago, and I know Alan was raving about it. I went back and rewatched it and was like, holy shit, this match is, what we have of it is absolutely incredible. And because they went to an hour-long draw, and because CIMA vacated the belt, they put together the match for Kobe World 2008. It would be Shingo versus BB Hulk for the vacant Dreamgate belt.
So the original idea was for this to be a 3-way so that CIMA's neck could take it a little better. Mm-hmm. Like the idea is like, okay, you do the draw. Well, we don't have one number 1 contender and we don't have a number 2 contender. We just have you two kind of tied. So I'll take you both on. And I wonder how they would have played that off with the Dream Keys, actually. Like, would CIMA have gotten 2 Dream Keys for that?
Well, they ended up doing this match at Final Gate 2012. Do you remember what the fallout of that was?
Gosh, I need to go back and look and see the key situation, because this is something that uniquely only I will care about.
I'm sure they added 2. I mean, there were 2 challengers.
I mean, that's the way I would do it. I mean, especially considering how he would look like in 2013 with that belt with the key bar being completely full. Which, it's weird. All-time great look. All-time great look.
Yes. Yeah. The swagger of 2013 CIMA is something to behold. But I never really thought about that. It's weird. It's, I think, the only 3-way Dreamgate match in history, and it's like they were hell-bent on doing that match because they would do it at Final Gate 2012 instead of at Kobe World 2008.
Right. The only other time, I think, would be the YAMATO Dreamgate Cage match at Dead or Alive 2017.
Yeah, that one's...
But that match wasn't very good, and he got 1 key.
Yeah. 2017 YAMATO, not one of my favorite wrestlers. July 4th, 2008... on CIMA's MySpace, he announces the talent list for DG in LA, and those names are Dragon Kid, Susumu, Yokosuka, Ryo, Saito, Naruki, Doi, Masato, Yoshino, BB Hulk, Gamma, Shingo, Yasushi Kanda, YAMATO, Genki Horiguchi, Stalker Ichikawa, El Generico, Pac, the Young Bucks, Dos Caras, CIMA himself, and signing autographs and taking photos, Hayabusa.
So Dos Caras has a deep relationship with CIMA, is the overall story about this. Like, like early in his training, like CIMA has like the Dos Caras clutch. It's because he views Dos Caras as much of a trainer as Ultimo. He probably now will say Dos Caras is his trainer, not Ultimo.
Yeah, I look at Caras as the hands-on primary trainer of the first Toryumon class. Ultimo's there as the visionary, but my understanding of the situation, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is that Dos Caras was the one that spent the most time in the ring with them.
Right, and then later that would be Skyda for T2P and into Toryumon X.
July 11th, 2008. I bring this up for two reasons. One, it is the next 2-year anniversary show, which featured Pac versus El Generico in what was billed as a Los Angeles import special match. So, to once again highlight, at this point in time, they are valuing their relationship with PWG just as much as they are with Ring of Honor. And they got Pac by way of PWG. Generico's career is entirely connected to PWG. And on this show, they have a singles match that is all but saying, hey, this is a PWG offer match.
Yeah, worth noting, and we'll talk about this when we get into Friday LA Extreme Night. El Generico, the Ford Exchange student of Tozawa Juku. Other things on this next 2-year anniversary show. Most notably, this was not held in Sanctuary, the former headquarters of Dragongate Pro Wrestling, the building in Kobe. This was actually held in Shinkiba First Ring because they treated this like a big anniversary show for them. They would be running Shinkiba First Ring off and on for that. The main event of this show, and this just, for me at least, I just go like, oh man, the time of this. El Blazer, Senjutsu no Hashi, and Takeshi Minamino, someone we talked about a couple weeks ago, Case, defeat World 1, MCKZ, Naoki Tanizaki, and Super Shenlong 2.
So I don't know if you remember this, but a few months ago, I stumbled upon this show. I had never seen it before. And before we started recording one night, I just blew you up about how good this show was. Yoshino Shisa Boy, which is Sachihoko Boy, Generico and Pac, and then that 6-man tag all make the TV. The full show makes TV. There's an entire infinity dedicated to this show that if you can track it down, again, it's July of 2008. It is such a fun experience. And I don't know how to mirror this into contemporary Dragongate. I guess we kind of have it with the Bulletin shows, but it's not, it's Dragongate talent, but it doesn't really feel like a Dragongate show. This felt like a Dragongate show, but in Shinkiba First Ring and with this crazy main event. And it is such a good watch. What we have of Generico Pac is great. What we have of Yoshino and Shisa Boy is fantastic. And then that main event is a ton of fun because El Blazer, a.k.a. Sugi, is a fantastic wrestler.
Opening on the show, you did not mention RyoSuka versus the Metabolic Brothers.
No, but that is extremely Mike Spears core, so I will leave that to you. That next show was the lead-in for Kobe World, which happened at the end of July 2008. This is a fine Kobe World show. I love the Bravegate match between Horiguchi and KZ. It is, to me, probably the first really great KZ match. I hate the Saito and Susumu versus Masato and Nozawa Wrong Guy Twin Gate match. That was a bunch of junk. And then the main event, Shingo won the Dream Gate belt for the first time by defeating BB Hulk in what was a very good match.
Yeah, for me, 2008 Kobe World is kind of colored about that main event because Shingo immediately turns face, or attempts to turn face right afterwards. He was, of course, one of the founders of Real Hazard. However, afterwards, and notably, this is one of the few times that Kobe Pro Wrestling Festival ends with a heel as the winner. He turns and he kind of like wedges his way into Typhoon in a very awkward fashion.
Yeah, so explain that to me as somebody, you know this time period better than I do. Shingo enters this match full on Real Hazard, but by the time Summer Adventure Tag League comes about, which is the next tour, he's teaming with Dragon Kid, and obviously on this show that we watched, the LA show, Real Hazard is very persistent and very noticeable throughout the show, and Shingo's not involved. So how did that turn happen?
So basically, like, it was a very much not like the whole, clean fighting heel thing. It just kind of was like, I feel like I need to go my own way here. And then he wedges himself into Typhoon, but him and Susumu Yokosuka did not get along in Typhoon, and he gets ejected. And then by the end of the year, and starting in 2009, he forms Kamikaze with Taku Owasa, Dragon Kid, and Akira Tozawa. So he gets into like this he's essentially a lone wolf for the remainder of 2008. And Case, as you know just as well as I, in that time period, being a lone wolf Dreamgate champion is an issue.
It is. It very much is. And, luckily in Summer Adventure Tag League for that year, he would at least have the company of Dragon Kid. So the teams that year, and this is all worth noting, because Summer Adventure Tag League is the most iconic one they've done. 2007 is very good. 2014 is very good, but 2008, you not only have the infamous first show, which we'll talk about here in just a second, but you have the finals, which were Doi and Yoshino versus Shingo and Dragon Kid, which I think is as good of a tag match in Dragon Gate history almost as anything else. But you had
it's better than any of the matches that they rematched with in DGUSA when Gabe tried to lift it.
Yeah, but the Philly match is really good.
Is the Philly match better than SATL 2008 finals, though?
It's not, but that Philly match is really fucking good. They're both. Let me put it this way: I have both the finals and the Philly match from November of 2009 at 4 3/4 stars.
Totally justified. Yeah. Totally justified. I think I lean towards Summer Adventure Tag League just because, like, for me, and I'll run down these teams at this time. Please. When I think about at least this late aughts period in Dragon Gate and the tag teams you had out there and the tag teams that will come up throughout this, it's a murder's row. You start off with Doyoshi, Speed Muscle, Naruki Doi, Masato, Yoshino. Then you have Taku Iwasa and Kenichiro Arai, former United Open the Twin Gate champions at that point. You have RyoSuka, as well as Susumu, Yokosuka, and Ryo Saito. This was before all the injury.
Hey y'all, Darius Rucker here. A lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.
Because then they started turning on each other. You had Mochi Fuji, like in their peak. Mochi Fuji, the aforementioned Shingo Takagi and Dragon Kid. BB Hulk and Naoki Tanizaki, you have to fill out your bracket somehow. Kanda and Gamma, it was the cheating team. Yamato and Kong, Cyber Kong's best tag team partner. And then the Young Bucks. If you ask me, looking at a tournament like this, with, of course, the caveat, you did not have CIMA at this time, but it's a murder's row. And when you talk about late aughts, and especially like the foundation of the Twin Gate division tag teams, you talk about Speed Muscle, you talk about Raiwa, and you talk about RyoSuka.
Yeah, no, it's as iconic of a lineup as there ever was, and that's not even factoring in that the first show of the tour is the infamous no-ring show. This is when CIMA imported a ring from America, and the way the Young Bucks tell the story is that they could tell just by setting up the ring, like, oh, this is no good. Like, CIMA's so excited. He thinks this is going to be, a softer canvas, a better ring. It's going to lead to healthier wrestlers. And it breaks in the three-way match with Shinobu and Anthony W. Mori and Genki Horiguchi. And instead of canceling the show, instead of doing whatever any other wrestling company would have done, Dragon Gate stripped down the ring. They taped the mat to the floor of Cork and Hall, and they ran the no ring show for the Summer Adventure Tag League matches, which were the Young Bucks versus Mochi Fuji, Dragon Kid and Shingo versus BB Hulk and Naoki Tanizaki, Saito and Susumu versus Arai and Iwasa, and Cyber Kong and Yamato versus Yoshino and Doi. 4 matches that are burned into my brain for forever.
Yeah, the Young Bucks talk about this a lot in their book. I think it's really worth it if you're interested in this time period. The Bucks, I would say that their book about when they talk about their Dragon Gate period, it is understandable, like the shock and all of that. But their account, at least of the No Ring show, I feel like is really illuminating for me. I love that Araiwa versus RyoSuka match. Like, that's my match of the show there. Though I know Mochi Fuji versus Young Bucks, for how brutal it was, also gets remembered in that regard as well.
Oh my God, because I mean, the Bucks. It's like the precursor to the Bucks versus Danielson and Strong that would happen a year later, where the match was laid out with I'm Don Fuji, this is Masaki Mochizuki, we're going to kill you, and then you guys will get a roll-up victory, and that's what happened. The Hulk Tanizaki team, it goes back to the Tanizaki discussion we had 2 weeks ago when we talked about Toriyama X. That just feels like an unfulfilled sort of destiny there, where that probably could have been an iconic Twin Gate team had they wanted it to be. So I love that match. Then it is probably my favorite Arai and Owasa match, is that one there. And then the main event is a genuinely, absolutely incredible match. The whole show, it's the best. There's a reason it's not only remembered as like, oh my god, they did a show without a ring, but the show was fucking incredible without a ring, and that is just God bless them.
Yeah, it's kind of in the very Dragon System way of, I always hate the term bootstraps, but like, you have the circumstance as you laid out. A lot of companies would be like, well, fuck, what do we do about this? And Dragon Gate's like, well, all right, we're not losing this show, we're going to get down to just basically making this almost like Choco, or what people would see as Choco Pro much later down the line. But instead, I mean, I think about like how brutal Owasa's Gory Bomb was on that show.
Yep, absolutely.
And just like going like, I remember like almost like each time I've seen that match, like kind of wincing during that. But it's one of those like uniquely Dragon Gate shows that I think that I wonder for like new fans, like this time period, because like we've talked about like the Ustream peak and all of that, and we've talked about how the promotions kind of ebbed and flowed with Western attention. This was one of those things that as soon as it happened, I remember vividly going on to the Figure 4 Wrestling Observer online boards, and just everyone, in particular Alan, losing their minds about like, look at what is happening. It's the most inventive thing in pro wrestling, and it's one of those uniquely Dragon Gate things as well.
It's the best. I mean, it was right at the time. There was the old Kevin Steen show on High Spots, which I just absolutely devoured, and the first Young Bucks one, which is WrestleMania weekend 2013. So they had just won the DGUSA tag belts. They record that show then, and it's like a top 10 shoot interview of all time. That's probably a conversation for us and Rob Naylor to rank the greatest shoots ever. But I would put the Young Bucks Kevin Steen show on that list. And this is right around the time when it came out that I was hardcore, or not even hardcore, but just starting to get into Dragon Gate, starting to really want to understand this promotion. And so they raved about the No Ring show on that shoot interview. And I watched it and it blew my mind. And here I am 11 years later, and I still get warm and fuzzy thinking about it. So that is all to paint a picture of where we're at in terms of what's happening in Japan, as we typically do on these shows when we cover something that's happening in America. At the end of July, they announced the lineup for the DG and LA show. This was again on CIMA's Myspace page. The only thing I'll note here is, one, we got confirmation that Hollywood Stalker Ishikawa would be wrestling Necro Butcher, and that match 4 on the show was Owasa and Arai versus Dragon Kid and Dos Caras, rather. We would learn a few days before the show that Dos Caras had suffered an eye injury and would be unable to compete in the Dragon Kid match. And somehow, in some way, his original replacement, if you thought it was weird Dos Caras was on the show in the first place, wait until you find out that he injured his eye, and his replacement for this show, the man that was supposed to team with Dragon Kid, was Vampiro.
My God. 2008 Vampiro too. Like, I don't think Vampiro has ever been good. Like, no. Like you talked about Conan earlier. I mean, it's very fitting that those two guys can't leave each other's orbits. But just imagining him teaming with Dragon Kid, like sliding doors.
It's unbelievable. So again, I have to come back as we end the timeline here. I have to come back to the PWG forum, and I would love to know if anybody remembers this username and if this person is still out there. But I have to give credit to the username Lord Akiyama, because if you go back to the forum, he's chronicling all of the Dragon Gate Japan stuff and is the one to break the news about everything happening with this Dragon Gate LA show. So I like knowing about the seemingly hardcore Dragon Gate fans that are out there in the English speaking world. If this person's still out there, I would love to hear from them, because they had very interesting insight in real time into all of these shows. So he's the one that I got a lot of these notes from, but it is also the user Tiger Driver 98, who used to create awesome music videos for PWG. He is the one that informed everybody on the forum that sadly Vampiro was working a show the night before, and allegedly his cell phone, passport, and travel documents were stolen from the locker room. Thus, Vampiro would not be on the Dragongate LA show. When this was announced to the live crowd, everyone cheered.
I have to ask, and I know that no one really has this number here. How many wallets has Vampiro gone through? Because I feel like this is always his excuse, is that someone stole his wallet. Like, consistently, whenever things have not gone his way or he's going to no-show, Vampiro gets his stuff stolen. Like,
you'd think he'd get a chain wallet at that point.
It would fit with his MO. I mean, wasn't he supposed to be a guardian and angel in Mexico City? Wasn't
I don't know. Who knows?
I think he was, like, at one time claiming to be like the head of the guardian angels in Mexico City. Shouldn't he have already like figured out a way to like secure himself? Like, if he's already like doing that kind of stuff, you know, like what are you doing?
Yeah, what a bummer. So that takes us to, because Vampiro was announced. It was announced that he wasn't going to be on the show at the start of the show. And so that takes us to September 5th, 2008. The official name of the show is what, Mike?
Oh, it is Friday LA Night. It's Friday LA Extreme Night.
That's right. Friday LA Extreme Night. It was followed a few days later by Dragongate Monday Aloha Night. We'll talk about that briefly after we're done here. But Mike, I hand things back to you to take us match by match through this incredibly, incredibly fun show from an incredibly fun time period.
So we have a pre-show match that does not make tape. Lil Cholo defeats Infernal and Junior. And before we know it, we are being brought into the ring as the Tozawa theme is playing and El Generico is coming out. We are greeted by Excalibur and Disco Machine. And I just wanted to like take a second for getting the show itself. What'd you think about these two on commentary? Because I felt like, considering what the rep was for Excalibur and Disco Machine as commentators, at least at this time, I was really pleasantly pleased by them throughout the show.
Well, they know the product, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, that was the big thing. It's like, oh, Disco Machine knows the product real well.
Yeah, he does. Because I think he resurfaced a few years ago.
I think.
He did Wrestle Jam because he talked about having a relationship with Gamma, but I think he resurfaced a few years ago and seemed like he knew ball still and was really up to date on stuff. But the way this show was eventually distributed was when Dragongate USA launched, they repackaged this as a Dragongate USA DVD with the Excalibur and Disco Machine post-production, but the show was shot, I think, by Pancoast Productions, which...
That would track, yeah.
Like, I remember going back again to, like, being a new indie wrestling fan in 2012, the amount of oxygen that Pancoast Productions took up, just being acutely aware that this was a thing that existed, and apparently... It was like a whole thing when they got involved. And it just, I don't know. It's just, it made me laugh reading that again, that they were involved in the production of this show.
And then like the sliding door of like Matt Pancoast quitting CZW kind of is the other thing that kind of comes to mind.
Like I'm sure I watched like a Sammy Callahan Smart Mark shoot interview where he was railing against Pancoast Productions, and me at 14 going like, oh, fuck Pancoast Productions then. All right, these are bad guys.
I can imagine you at age 14 being very positively influenced by Sammy Callahan. But let's talk about this first match. We start off with El Generico versus Genki Horiguchi. El Generico wins this match with the brainbuster after 9 minutes. Real Hazard throughout this match, just being a real presence. There'll be a thing throughout the show. And however, it is Wrestle 1 that makes the save afterwards, setting up the Open the Triangle Gate match later on this show.
So I'll come back to the match itself because I have to note, and again, this kind of goes back to the production, but there's two issues with the production on this show. One, the crowd is too low. The crowd is very clearly reacting to things and not giving the level of volume that they should get. And then after the opener, Generico and Horiguchi, the post-match promo with Gamma and Doi, the microphones don't pick up the audio the right way. So there's two inherent flaws there. Otherwise, I feel comfortable saying this. There is not a Dragongate USA show in history, from the first one to the last one, that looked as good as this show did.
Yeah, I mean, like, say what we will about Pancos, and I'll say this about, like, the commentary and the mix there. Very common for PWG at that time.
Yes.
Because, so like, I can see that being a facet of that, like, with this. But real frustrating throughout the show. The crowd, like, this was a rec center gym. You see they're using the overhead lights. You see the crowd, like, also notably in comparison to Dragon Gate USA, heavy Asian kind of representation there, and it felt like at least that there were people that came out specifically to, not like standard indie wrestling fans in Los Angeles that came out specifically because they followed Dragongate. Like, there was that vibe from the crowd immediately.
Well, I have to give credit to CIMA, because while he was injured, he did a ton of local promotion in California where he would do autograph signings and meet and greets. And, we're talking about a Japanese wrestler in Southern California, but he had boots on the ground from the announcement of this show in April through the actual show date. He really hustled to make this a thing. And you're exactly right. This wasn't the PWG crowd at the time. It's very reminiscent, to come full circle, of AAA selling 10,000 tickets in Los Angeles in 1994 and no one really knowing what to do with these fans because they weren't the typical white English-speaking wrestling fan that buys tickets to the events. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. The reported attendance is 1,000 fans. People that were there will go, well, no, there weren't 1,000 fans there, but there were 500 fans there, and the 500 fans that were there were super into it, and rightfully so, because Generico and Genki was a perfect opener.
Yeah, especially considering where Generico was in the thick of things as a foreigner within Dragon Gate. He was treated with a good level of respect considering where he was, and Genki at this time was Bravegate champion. So this was seen as kind of like a big win for him in that regard.
One of the other sliding glass door moments that I want to talk about on this show is, you're exactly right. Generico was treated with a level of respect, both in Japan and then especially on this show, that is notable. And he was basically done with Dragon Gate after this. He worked through Gate of Destiny that year and then did the European tour, where he was on the UK show, but I think he did the WXW show, and then I think he did the Spain show too. And then he's done. And you think about this and you go, okay, well, we're in 2008. If Generico would have stayed on, and I don't know if Dragon Gate didn't have the money to bring him over, or if they decided that he wasn't worth the trouble, perhaps due to his Ring of Honor affiliation. But okay, Generico's in there in 2009. That's a super interesting time period. Maybe because he's so talented, he sticks around until 2010. And now you're getting to 2011 when it's Blood Warriors Junction 3, and perhaps El Generico could have been involved in that. And then on the state side, you think about, like, Generico and Steen are rapidly approaching, they're Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions at this point, or are about to be. But a year later, they're running out of things to do in Ring of Honor. So this is July 2009 that I'm talking about. And they're getting to the point where they're just about to break up and then do the year-long feud that they did in 2010. Imagine if they would have done that, but in Dragon Gate USA. And that is such an interesting thing to think about, where even if you just have Generico in DG USA instead of Ring of Honor, it changes history. But for a Dragon Gate fan, it's possibly more interesting history. But then if you have Steen and Generico coming to Dragon Gate USA, even though Steen wasn't necessarily fond of working with the Dragon Gate guys, if you bring those guys over and then you keep on sending Generico to Japan, and then you have Steen and Generico break up in Dragon Gate USA and kind of subsequently evolve, we're talking about a totally different wrestling universe than what we have now.
Yeah, I mean, we saw through John Moxley in DG USA that you didn't necessarily have to be lockstep with Dragon System style, and I know he's really like like in recent years, whenever it's come up, he's kind of been like offhanded about like that kind of time period. But there was a way, at least at that time, that I feel, and I know that I'm the Gabe detractor here, Gabe would have made that work, and I feel like that it could have played off there very well.
Well, I mean, God, they did the feud in Ring of Honor in spite of Ring of Honor wanting to kill it multiple times, wanting the feud to be over in June at Death Before Dishonor, and then not having any interest in Cabana and Carino being involved. And, Ring of Honor hated the final battle match because it got in the way of Davey and Roddy that year. It's, I don't know if it would have been better or worse, but it would have been very interesting had Generico gone down this Dragongate path, because he was really respected there, and it's fucking El Generico. He was great everywhere all the time.
Yeah, they were so out on El Generico in 2010 that Ken and King beat him in Survival of the Fittest.
I mean, he's gone in June of 2011, and by that point was in the process of getting to DDT, and then he comes back, and if you listen to Cornette talk about his last year in Ring of Honor, he was confused. He says he was confused because, Generico wants to come back and work Ring of Honor, but he's always in Japan all the time, and he couldn't get a straight answer. But it's like, yeah, like, he didn't want to be there. It's fucking El Generico. How do you not understand the greatness of El Generico? Even watching this Genki match, again, it kind of goes back to my point earlier of this was like a Dragongate TV pilot, and you couldn't have kicked things off with a better, more high-energy match, more authentically Dragongate match when you factor in the real hazard interference than what they did in this match.
Right, yeah. I really enjoyed it for what it was. I was 3.5 stars on this. I thought this rocked. Yeah. I thought that, especially, I have a soft spot for heel Genki at this time period. I know you don't, but...
No, I love Genki, but I don't typically love this era of his career outside of that KZ match at World and then this match right here.
Yeah, but I think we could both agree, Genki looks, this is like, if it's not like number one with like the surfboard look, this might be number two, his go to hell kind of character. Just an all-time great Dragongate look.
Very much so. Really jumps off the screen.
Yep. After that, we had match 5 of the Hollywood Stalker Ichikawa Buso 10-match series. So Hollywood Stalker Ichikawa, he was not Hollywood at this point. We added Hollywood actually after the show. But he goes up against Necro Butcher. He loses in 18 seconds after a straight punch to the face. We get the bag, and we get it restarted. However, we get 6 minutes of him getting, outside of what CIMA does to him, some of the more brutal beatings that Stalker ever takes, ending with a Tiger Driver onto the chairs for a Necro Butcher to win in 6 minutes and 23 seconds.
Isn't it funny that, and this is, this podcast is famously not horny, and 99% of the time not political, but isn't it funny that 10 years ago, if you ask anybody in WWE, they'd be like, oh man, Kane is the smartest guy in the locker room. And if you ask anybody in independent wrestling, they'd be like, Necro Butcher's the smartest guy in the locker room. And they have proven to be two of the biggest dumb fucks in the history of dumb fucks. It's amazing how that worked out. Unfortunately,
have you ever seen like a Necro Butcher like shoot interview of that time?
Oh my god, the guy on his high horse is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like no wonder he's ended up that way. But also, like, if he wasn't where he was in life, and if he was like 10 years younger and just didn't go off the deep end, I think he would have been like one of MJF's, like, how MJF always does, like the trials before he faces a babyface.
He would have been in the Nick Gage spot.
Exactly. Like Necro Butcher, I feel like in a different sliding doors, all of that. Necro Butcher would have been on AEW TV, and it would have rocked.
It's the unfortunate part of Necro. That's what I want to talk about is, I expect zero morality from pro wrestlers. Outside of specific circumstances, they're all Republicans. They're all bad people. I live with it. But it's a real bummer that Necro is, because god damn do I love Necro Butcher in this era. Go back if you've never seen it before and watch him and Super Dragon from Bola 2006. It's there's a bunch of Dragongate guys on that show. You can watch all the Dragongate guys. And then that is the match that ends Super Dragon's full-time career, because he was so beat up from that match that he could never really walk the same way again. And you understand why Necro has a bunch of head trauma after watching it, because it's one of the more brutal matches that there's ever been. But Necro and PWG, Necro in Gabe Ring of Honor, and then Necro even in like Adam Pearce era Ring of Honor is such an interesting wrestler. And you're right, he would have been on American TV had he come along 10 years later, and he should have been on American TV, used in small doses, used as a very specific kind of guy, but he had that level of talent, and you see it even in the Stalker match. Like, he kind of gets the Stalker game.
Yeah, and You could like he was so tied into the other side of wrestling at that time that I don't know like you really could see him coming in at that time. But there's a little bit of energy there that like maybe it is that I still have good feelings from Johnny Valletta. Did not think I'd say that in January, but just the monster kind of character there. Like you could see him like going through Dragongate for like 4 months, getting a title match and then bailing out, you know?
He could have been in a real hazard very easily.
Yeah. And man, everyone going for like Beast Mordos, you know how that's kind of becoming kind of memey. Just imagining like the choose death thing right now.
Yeah. You're right. The atomic drop to Ichikawa on the open chair was one of the more brutal spots I've seen.
Yeah, I really wonder. Like, we got to see Stalker earlier this year. The guy, I still think, like, to my heart, best comedy wrestler of all time. But the way he has wrestled and put his body through it, I wonder what, like, it's got to be tough for him at this point, you know, just getting around.
Yeah, you know, it's Kawada and Takayama and Aja Kong and Shinobu Kandori and Yuji Nagata and Necro Butcher, and they're not pulling punches when they wrestle him. You know, even if it's few and far between over 25 years, he's getting the most violent version of all of these people.
Yeah, and gosh, if 2024 was a little easier on both of us, I would love to get into like Stalker Chikawa's career because boy, is it interesting. It's kind of singular, and I use that term way too much, but I feel like it applies to him.
Oh, I mean, the big Stalker matches are second to none. It's just such a delight.
Yeah, absolutely. But so if you've never seen a Necro Butcher match, which, you know, there might actually be people now who have not seen that, Stalker and him have a really fun, like 10-minute segment here. It's worth going out of your way for.
Again, sorry to cut you off, but it's worth noting it's authentically Stalker Ichikawa. It's the same thing you would have got in Japan, and it kind of goes back to the Gabe thing where, and there's a few names on the show like this, but Gabe never used Stalker outside of Atlanta, and I would say Gabe didn't. I could just see Gabe, and again, I don't know him personally, but I could see Gabe going like, yeah, Stalker Ichikawa. Anyways, Naruki Doi, here's what you're going to do. Because he doesn't think in Dragongate brain. He thinks that I have to sell DVDs with great matches brain. And that is not producing an authentic Dragongate product. Stalker Ichikawa is producing the authentic Dragongate product.
Yeah, I mean, however, I'm looking right now at the Atlanta cards right now. And just, you did the Brody Lee match and you did not do an immediate rematch. Like, come on. That's like to the core what Stalker Ichikawa is there for.
Yeah, good point. And then he did the scramble the next night, I think. And he was fun in the scramble. But again, it's just, you know, Gabe never used Kanda. He only used Gamma once. And that was, you know, purely by the way of CIMA wanting Gamma in America.
You mean the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona for the year of 2010, Gamma.
And famously, you know, because it ties into the next match, Gabe was very, very late on Pac, did not understand him. You know, he worked the two UK shows in 2007, and I thought those matches were great. I think he worked Roddy and Seidel that weekend, and then he came to America and worked Danielson, and it wasn't a great match. And for the longest time, Gabe did not see anything in Pac, whereas Dragongate did.
Yeah, and an interesting thing about this show that we should say right now, Shingo and Pac actually happened after the next match, live. And they edited it in together. But we go into Shingo versus Pac. It's my match of the night. I just absolutely fucking adored it. Shingo wins with a Made in Japan after a Stay Dream kick out. This rocked. I was 4.5 stars on this case. This was my favorite thing. This might be some of my favorite wrestling that I've seen since Danielson winning the title last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I adored this.
I am 4.25 stars on this, and I have a 4.5 star match coming up. So it was not my match of the night, but it is a good reminder of two things. One, as we are now recording this on the week of his 20th anniversary, it's important to note that Shingo has been objectively capital O, great capital G, with the very last cutoff of him not being great at September of 2005. So when we're talking September 2008, he has been great for years. He is a great base in this match. He is a great power junior in this match. He sells his ass off. He does cool moves. Everything you could want in a wrestler is what Shingo Takagi does in this match. The other thing, before I throw it back to you, that is worth noting, and I think this is largely forgotten, again, because Pac wasn't in Ring of Honor at this time, is that even though he didn't have the body or the gear that we would all grow accustomed to, by 2008, Pac is a phenomenal wrestler.
You see, that was a question I was going to ask you. I know we talk so fondly about the Ricochet Apprentice program that he had and all of that. Did we maybe like underestimate when Pac's peak started?
100% yes. His first bit of greatness, and Alan, I'm sure, can check us on this, but to me, he has a Generico singles match in PWG in 2006 and an AJ Styles match in 2006. I don't like the AJ match as much as other people do. The 2006 Generico match is outstanding. The 2007 Generico match, the rematch, is when Pac is officially like, oh, that's a guy. And if that would have happened now, you and I would have pegged him as a guy. He would have been a 30 under 30 guy for us. Like it was happening for Pac as early as 2007 when he had those awful white tights, when he was pale as a skeleton. It was happening even then. And if you spend time watching 2008 Dragongate, Pac is all over TV, and your impression every single time he pops up on TV is like, man, I didn't realize Pac was that good back then, but he is. And so by 2009, 2010, he's fully fleshed out. And then 2011 with the Ricochet stuff, he is otherworldly. He's in tier 1 or tier 2, but he's great going back to 2007.
Hey, just as an aside, you know what they could run back now? They could run back Pac versus Ricochet, and it will just absolutely blow everyone's mind.
I would assume on that Wrestle Dream show, they're going to do Pac, Ricochet, Ospreay in a 3-way. That seems like that's what they're building to, which is, a different incarnation. We saw Pac, Ricochet, and Swan in Dragongate USA. And then from there, yeah, they might go in the Ricochet, Ospreay direction. They might go in the Ricochet Pac direction. What they should do, and this is why I should have the pencil, and I should tell my good friend Tony Khan this, because we have had 1.5 hour conversation one time.
Can you slide him some of my ideas too while you're at it?
Let me get through my lengthy list of things that he can do on TV right now that he's not doing. But what they should do is they should steal a card from early, and I mean early Ring of Honor, and they should, on one night of TV, do a round robin challenge with Ospreay, Pac, and Ricochet where they all wrestle each other.
Oh, yeah. Congratulations. You have that night taken care of, Tony. Go work on Fulham.
And then you can do a Dragongate special and do a 3-way trios match with the 9 guys in the ring. And then you can have Captain's Fall matches. And then before you know it, we're into December and you've booked the best program of the entire year with Pac and Ricochet and Ospreay, because it shouldn't be that hard.
It really shouldn't. But my God, this match. I just really... Shingo at this time, he is Dreamgate champion, and he just, I don't know what it is in this versus where things were in Japan. He felt immediately 100 times more of a factor than Lone Wolf in this match. It was oh my God, this is the Shingo that American crowds were kind of used to. They just kind of took away the trappings. And I feel in one way, this is the unique way that this show is better than what's happening in 2008.
I kind of forgot about this until I watched this match, because Shingo in New Japan, it's the same level of greatness, but he works in a different way. And I think even in his last few years in Dragongate, he had just aged out of the thing I'm about to compliment him on. But I forgot how fast he was. He's
oh my God,
he's all over the place in this match. And you think about Pac, light heavyweight, flying all over the place, very quick guy, but on a step-for-step basis, Shingo's right there with him, and I kind of forgot that young Shingo had that level of quickness. That wasn't just the quick lariat off the ropes, but the entire thing, he's just flying around the ring.
Yeah, and at least for me, I think that there were a couple moments in this match, the Made in Japan and one of the pumping bomber bumps that Pac takes in this match. It is a wonder this guy had been as healthy as he has, because though, did you know which puppy bomber I'm talking about, right? Like he lands
Yeah.
on his head. It's incredible.
No, it's a phenomenal match. I haven't watched it now in many years. I know people were just talking about it. I think on the Discord, maybe it was on Twitter. But there's their UK match between the two in 2011, and that one, just because it's 2011 Pac, is probably a hair better. But you can't sleep on this match. I mean, it's Shingo and Pac. If you are thinking like, oh man, that sounds great, guess what? It is.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought? Pac's always been great.
I know.
So the match that happened before this, but was after this on the DVD, Araiwa facing Takuwasa and Kenichiro Arai facing off against Dragon Kid, pardon me, and Kendo. And it is Dragon Kid and Kendo winning this match with an Ultra Rana on Arai. Afterwards, there's another Real Hazard beatdown. CIMA and a Dos Caras mask makes the save and cuts a promo to a monster. Like the one pop that you could really hear over commentary. The crowd was going nuts.
So Kendo, for those that don't know, is, I guess, a Dominican-born wrestler, but he wrestled a lot of his career in Mexico.
Right.
He was an integral part of Hamada's Universal, which we talked about earlier on this show. And then my assumption, and I would love for somebody to give me more information, is that he just retired and lived in Southern California, or semi-retired and lived in Southern California, because he's all over West Coast Indies at this time if you look at his cage match. But I have no idea how they got Kendo for this show. Now, again, it's kind of a cool nod to the Dragon System lineage, because Kendo is a standout performer in 90, 91, 92 in Hamada's Universal. I don't know how they got it. It would have made sense, given the time period, Mike, if it was Dragon Kid and Human Tornado. I don't know how they got, in 24 hours notice, Kendo to come on this show, but from a historical anecdote, I'm glad they did.
Yeah, Kendo, for what I know, like the end of like his like main Mexican tour career was when he lost the Kendo mask, and then he had issues kind of getting bookings or like being the same star he was then. I think he's still alive in Southern California, to my knowledge. I
don't believe he's passed. The cage match says he's still alive, so
I want to say that sometime over the last few years, I've seen someone pop up with a photo of Kendo. Might have been Roy Lucier. But
well, I mean, of course,
like odds are Luchador, Roy Lucier. But
OJ's house was also a photo with Roy Lucier. He's been around.
I'm so sad that photo got taken.
Oh, it's the greatest thing ever. Anybody mad at Roy needs to get a life. If I drive by OJ's house, I'm taking a fucking photo too.
Will you give a thumbs up?
Oh my god, absolutely. Oh my god, it's the fucking greatest. Kendo worked a Pro Wrestling Masters show in 2018.
I mean, good for him. Get that the other people behind Wrestle One money,
Isn't this so on brand? It's Kendo, the Great Sasuke, and all caps Sato, so Dick Togo, against Fujita, Masato, and Nozawa Rangai.
Perfect in every way.
It's the best. And then Great Kojika and Kim Duck worked on this show. Kim Duck he's like 150. He began wrestling in 1968.
Yeah, no. You know how like when Ogawa retired, I started to try to think of like full-time wrestlers. Like no one brought up Kim Duck, but I don't think Kim Duck's only worked on like these kinds of shows. Like I think he appeared on that Onita blasting bat match with
He did. Oh my god. So he's only 72? Which seems impossible because he looked fucking ancient in black and white JWA footage.
No, that's true. God, that Onita show, such awful vibes.
So sad.
Dory Funk and Osama Nishimura, who I did not know he had stage 4 cancer, and he did an exploding bat match. Like,
yeah,
Onita, just ugh.
That's so sad.
As someone who loves Araiwa, I was kind of let down by this one, but I think that was also like plugging people in. This was going to be that kind of down match, but you had the Dragon Kid pops.
Sadly, and I say this as somebody that actually, like, if you've never seen Prime Kendo, it's worth a watch because he's a really engaging and energetic wrestler. Sadly, it's the least interesting of the proposed Dragon Kid versus Tozawa Juku matches. Dragon Kid and Dos Caras would have been really effing cool, and Dragon Kid and Vampiro would have been the most interesting team to ever team together ever.
Yeah, this is it just like, and for like Awasa, like this is, I mean, we're getting almost to the point where he gets hurt and that's it. Like he has, I think, essentially 15 months as a full-time wrestler left. Like he never gets booked in DGUSA because Gabe wouldn't know what to do with the guy, to be quite honest. And Araiwa, like, you have to be in for the vibes if you like Araiwa. I think they have some of the best double team work ever in a Dragongate ring out of a tag team, and you got to see some of it in this match. But go watch the no ring match of RyoSuka. That I feel like embodies more Araiwa than this one.
I completely agree with that.
After that, we had for the Open the Twin Gate titles, representing Typhoon, Ryo Saito and Susumu Yokosuka defending against World 1 assistants, the Young Bucks, and it is RyoSuka retaining with a premium bridge by Ryo Saito on Matt Jackson. I really like this period of Ryo Saito. I really do.
Oh my God. Well, look, this is my match tonight. This, I went 4.25 on Shingo Park. I went 4.5 on this. It is not quite at the level of the Bucks and Susumu and CIMA from the first Dragongate USA show, but it's the article that I wrote 5 years ago. Unfortunately, as we record this, we're living in the one time where the Young Bucks have not been, if not the most interesting tag team on the planet, then top 5 at worst. And it goes back to 2008. It goes back to this time period where they have a match that if you put this on any show nowadays, this would be the match that people are talking about. It would be vintage Young Bucks as we've come to know it. This just happened to be so early in their career.
Right, and I think you compare and contrast this with the Open the Historic Gate match. I think you do see over that would be, 10 months?
Yeah.
Thereabouts, that 10-month difference. There is a little bit more of a polish on them there, but you also have to think about time period-wise, and Excalibur and Disco Machine adeptly put this out in commentary. Matt is 23, Nick just turned 19.
And Nick looks 14 in the match.
Yeah, that's the wild thing to me. I feel like until he started working New Japan, he looked like a teenager.
You're exactly right. That's a very, very good point. And it kind of leads to the other thing of man, what if the Bucks had just stayed working Dragongate? And this is the other time that TNA interjected itself, because the Bucks were working Dragongate through May of 2009, and then Dragongate USA starts, but they're still working Ring of Honor, and they're very conflicted on what to do because they want to be loyal to the Dragongate guys, but they felt like Ring of Honor might have been a better position for them at the time. And then TNA came in, and TNA played bad guy to both parties, and they were ushered into TNA and taken away from the Dragongate guys. And, they've said on record that the relationship with them and all the Dragongate guys has never quite been the same since.
Yeah, and if you read their book again, there were monetary concerns at that time, especially concerning that at least with Matt was already starting to have a family too.
Yeah, that's true.
So there is a level of that, but I mean, I think that you look at this time period in the foreigners and really it's not a sense of betrayal. We talk about family in terms of Dragongate, to the extent now that they use that, not because of us, but because it's a thing that they use the term family now as their slogan. And I did it, even if it's done no, we understand, there's going to be hurt feelings given the fact that they basically brought those guys in for that. And it was their first real international break. And I think that it's human to kind of have that sort of sting, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. 2 spots I want to mention before we move on. One, Nick Jackson misses a 630 splash. I have watched more Young Bucks matches than 98% of the humans on Earth. I have never seen him do a 630 before or since, and I can't believe he did one and missed. That is insane to do in this match.
Yeah, and it's kind of remarkable. You see them kind of piecing together the trademarks that they started doing already before in PWG, but I feel like even that short 4-month stint, you're starting to see a level of continuity that they did not have because of just 4 months in Dragongate.
Well, you're so right, because you can really define 2007 and 2008. They belong to one era of the Bucks, and then 2009 until New Japan, which is the fall of 2013, is this entirely define in and of itself era as well. And you start to see in this match the Bucks formula that would win over and over and over again. It would take place in matches like this. The other thing that I want to note, because you and I are so fond of Saito and Susumu at this time period, the pop-up German they do where Susumu, it's almost like giving a kid like an uppie, like he throws the guy into the air and then Saito German suplexes him, is one of the best tag team spots in history. I have to mention that because they did that in this match, and every time I watch a match from this era, I go, somebody should just steal that. That is such a good looking move.
There's not enough uppy moves. Like Grand Amplitude from American Alpha was one of those great uppy moves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we need to have more uppy kind of finishes, not like Shatter Machine. I mean, you basically toss the guy up in the air and the other guy finishes the move.
Nah, it's corn dog material. Absolute cornballs right there. But no, this match is, I went 4.5 on it. It's the peak of Saito and Susumu as a team, working a Saito and Susumu match that by the end of it delves into basically a proto Bucks match. By 2009, what we would recognize as the Bucks formula, the match turns into that, but it still has that like first era Twin Gate feel to it. It's just a fantastic match. And it goes to show just how good the Bucks have been for so long now.
Yeah, I was 4.25. I was not far off on that. Just an absolute blast. And yeah, RyoSuka, maybe that Summer Adventure Tag League's worth a rewatch sometime soon in my future. But
yeah, because I think there's a TV match with them and the Bucks in Kyoto, or maybe the old
Nagoya.
Maybe Yokohama, but I think there's a clipped version of a Bucks match from that tag league that makes TV, and the clipped version of it is really, really good.
Ah, man. Yeah, I'm going to seek that out. And then we had our main event of the evening, the Dragongate title match. Real Hazard, Gamma, YAMATO, and Yasushi Kanda defending against the World 1 top team, the three-headed monster, as Case put it, BB Hulk, Masato, Yoshino, and Naruki Doi. Gamma wins this match with a wild-ass tombstone off the top rope after we get Real Passion of BB Hulk hours to retain it for Real Hazard. Just a real chaos, everything happening, Real Hazard match, 2008 vintage happened.
Well, the difference between this match and this match, if it happened in Korakuen, is not that great, and it goes back to the overarching point that I've made this entire episode: is Gabe viewed the Dragongate 6-man as everything that happened in Chicago Ridge, and that is the version of it, and that is the version of it that American audiences want. And this match is, so painfully authentic, and again, felt like it could have happened in Korakuen or in Osaka number 2. It has that level of temperament to it. It has that level of emotion to it. It has that crazy pacing. It has that crazy finish. It is a phenomenal trios match, and it is once again a reminder that this era of Hulk in particular is a really, really fun era that I think just because he's been broken down for so long now that people either forget about or maybe don't even realize that at one point he was this good.
Yeah, like a real bummer for me is now sinking in the fact that we have probably been 9 years since peak Hulk or thereabouts.
Well, it'll be 10 in December of this year, because the Shingo match from that final gate is kind of the last stand. Now, that's not to say, that he was totally washed after that, but we saw physical changes and mobility changes directly following that Shingo match.
Right. So you have prime BB Hulk. You have Masato Yoshino as fast as he ever was. You have you have Naruki Doi, who, gosh, getting like the blast in the past of some of the speed muscle offense here. Doi was a madman in kind of this era. Like you're watching a certain era of Naruki Doi when he's just like, oh, I'm just gonna. This seems like the perfect moment for me to cannonball you in the corner. Like, hope you're ready for that. It's happening. And you contrast that with a Real Hazard team that, like, there is the issues of Gamma and especially Kanda at this time. Kanda, not really the most invigorating wrestler, I would say. Really. But
not a ton of fond memories of 2008 Gamma, I must admit.
Right. But you have just lightning in the ball Yamato. Like right before the real MMA Yamato kind of comes out, being kind of the formative captain of this team. You get some nice, like, the closing sequence where Hulk just basically takes everything was kind of the core of what Wrestle One was, or what World One was at that time. Like, it was like he was the clear 1C, but you had him always kind of take that and being saved by Doyoshi. And there were moments that I completely not looking around there. It's like, well, did they do a title change here just because of what all he was kicking out of? But it took Gamma. He goes for the Gamma special, gets the kick out, a whole bunch of box attacks, a powder, and then the tombstone off the top rope. I don't remember me enjoying a 2008 Gamma match this month.
Yeah, it made me want to go back and watch a lot of Real Hazard. One, to see if there's like better Gamma and Kanda stuff than I realized, but also as we were living in the current era of Yamato and the renaissance that he's had, and the way that he's carried this company this year, that all begins in the same way that for Shingo and Hulk, they had New Hazard to really hit the ground running. For Yamato, it's Real Hazard, and it makes me really want to go back and watch some of this Real Hazard stuff just to figure out how we got to where we're at today.
Yeah, I feel like Yamato should go find the flags again. Like, that was always the thing that like identified him for me. It's
a presentational thing. It goes back to what we talked about at the start. That used to be a guaranteed new unit unveils the flag with the logo and everything, and that's just, I mean, granted, it's been a while since we've had a new unit, but it doesn't happen.
I mean, Paradox didn't have like symbols like I think they had like a title card that they showed up. But no, I'm talking about the flags that Yamato has on his tights that usually get pulled off.
I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking about branding. No, you're right. Those are also fun.
Yeah, it was just like one of those things that kind of made Yamato different and special. And I guess I'm kind of hoping that like Paradox, like trying to be something that should not exist right now, and it's like Yamato should go find some battle flags, put them in his tights, put them in like let them fall off in the middle of his Dreamgate matches. That's what we need.
That is Dragongate in LA. That was followed by a show in Hawaii a few days later. I don't know, Mike, is there a full version of the Hawaii show floating out there? There's not. See, that's a bummer, because that card has Mori on it, it has Kness on it, and KZ on it, and
they flew into Zawa and Katsuo for it.
Yeah, and this is right before Katsuo left, too. This is kind of one of his last appearances. There's a Genki and Tanizaki Bravegate match, and then the main event, I know the main event airs relatively in full on whatever week of TV in 2008 it was, because it's Doi, Yoshino, and Hulk against Shingo, Dragon Kid, and Pac, and it is a pretty spectacular six-man, as it sounds like on paper.
Yeah, I guess the one thing, like, looking at this card, I forgot that Pac was still in Typhoon at this point.
Yeah, because there's the May Kobe show where World 1 is announced. There's a Twin Gate match on that show that is Saito and Susumu against Dragon Kid and Pac in Sambo Hall. And that is probably, I'd have to go back and look at the full match listings, but that's probably the real coming out party for Pac in Japan, is that match. And it's very much Typhoon aligned.
It's almost like Dragon Kid is one of the better influences that no one talks about.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. It's just every wrestler of an entire generation is like, oh, that's the reason I got into this. And
just no one in the West is willing to acknowledge it unless it's a Joshi who says it.
That takes us to, so that is their LA show. That is the Hawaii show. That takes us to September 13th, 2008, back in Japan at Differ Ariake. This is the ROH show that we were talking about earlier, Battle of the Best, which I think is best remembered for the Roddy Davey Richards match, or maybe the Danielson Nigel match on that show, because they had a non-title singles match there. But on the show was Yamato versus Eddie Edwards, Austin Aries versus Ryo Saito, which is super disappointing given how good Aries was in 2008 and how good Saito was in 2008.
But understandable given Austin Aries, though.
Yeah, his kryptonite was working against other talented Dragon Gate wrestlers. He could never figure out how to do it, and he was good against everybody else. It's so disappointing. Yeah. And then the six-man tag that was Dragon Kid, El Generico, and Shingo against Hulk, Yoshino, and Doi. And the reason that this is worth noting is it's the last time we see any sort of affiliation with Dragon Gate and Ring of Honor. Again, this is September of 2008. So if you jump ahead about 8 months, you go to April of 2009, And we end here, as it's so apt that we do on this episode, with a CIMA Myspace post in which he says, "Hello, everybody. I have been receiving inquiries about why isn't Dragongate wrestlers on the upcoming Ring of Honor WrestleMania weekend shows. These are the shows in Houston. Or what is the relationship between Dragongate and Ring of Honor? Well, I can't tell you in detail because our lawyer is working on the case in the States, but what I can tell you is that Dragongate no longer has any relationship with Ring of Honor. One of the reasons is because we haven't got payment for the past ROH show held in Japan in September 2008. Some of the Ring of Honor wrestlers' airfare and their guarantees were supposed to be shared between the two companies, but that promise had never been kept. I recently heard from some of my dear friends about not being paid from Ring of Honor as well. Any business is based on trust, and we no longer wish to do any business with Ring of Honor. Again, Dragongate wrestlers, however, love all Ring of Honor wrestlers as well as its fans, so we are sad this situation is happening. Please keep in mind that we are still planning to do our shows in the States, and we have a very good relationship with PWG in Los Angeles, California." And then CIMA concludes by saying, "Even though Dragongate hasn't announced the above statement to the media, I can't ignore my American fans. I just want to let you know what is going on, and I will try to keep you updated with any of our future plans. Please come and support Dragongate and cheer us on when we're in the States." Ring of Honor, and I would assume at this point that this is Kerry Silken directly, wrote a response in the day that followed and said, "CIMA from the Dragongate promotion in Japan has made claims that Ring of Honor owes Dragongate money from our September 2008 show, saying that some of the Ring of Honor wrestlers' airfare and their guarantees were supposed to be shared between the two companies, but that promise had never been kept. That statement is false. All Ring of Honor talent was paid in full for these events along with their airfare. CIMA and the Dragongate promotion are very well aware of what agreements they did not live up to in regards to the Ring of Honor Dragongate show and why we no longer choose to do business with them."
So, just jumping in right here.
Please, yes.
Notable what Kerry or Ring of Honor does not mention.
Which is?
Dragongate did not get paid.
Yeah.
They did not acknowledge that major talking point for what CIMA said.
And then if you go to the Observer, this is the April 20th, 2009 Observer, Dave repeats all of this, but then notes that the Dragongate show only drew 600 fans, and that there was some infighting, one between Noah and Ring of Honor regarding working with Dragongate, and then issues with Dragongate and Ring of Honor, insinuating that Dragongate didn't work hard enough to promote the show, given that regular Dragongate shows in Tokyo usually draw substantially more, which is entirely true, at least in terms of Dragongate shows drawing more than normally 600 people.
Yep, 3 times as amount in Corkin at that time.
Yep, exactly. So Dave then goes on to point out that, this was bad blood between Kerry Silken and Dragongate. By this point, Gabe was gone. And I guess before Gabe left, he had tried to patch this relationship up and explain to both parties how important it was that they work together, that they'd get through this. Kerry at this point was completely done with the Dragongate guys, and the Dragongate guys were completely done with Kerry. Our final note in the timeline, and again, I should note that CIMA Myspace post we just read was April 13th, 2009. April 15th, 2009, Gabe Sapolsky announces the launch of Dragongate USA.
And for that, we have 50 episodes for you to listen to and discover that.
Oh, boy, do we.
So, yeah, I'm going to say something that I know I said 4 years ago during this. For those who do not know, Differ Ariake was the home arena of Pro Wrestling Noah at that time that they solely owned. Dragongate only worked, as you could probably pick up through the show, this is the first time in, only really did Corkins and an occasional Shinkiba first ring. Like, that's a big difference there. So also the fact that Dragongate based in Kobe. If this was a tour that was going to do Differ Ariake for Noah in Tokyo, and then, I don't know, Ideon number 2, or at that time, Bodymaker number 2 in Osaka, then I feel like that there would have been a better point that Dragongate should have promoted that market. However, I think it's kind of understandable with all of this, at least the Dragongate stance. Of course, we're a Dragongate podcast, so bias might be inherent there. But yeah, this is, and like very soon afterwards, Kerry fired Gabe, like within a month after these shows.
Yeah, because Gabe's gone at the end of October.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to kind of like look at that, and I know that we talk about it in depth in the Rewind and Rewatch series, but yeah, this was kind of the precursor to what all happened. I mean, would it be, I guess, a question I'll pose to you, Case, before we get out of here. Do you think in at least, let's see, when CIMA announced the first the first Myspace thing was back in April, do you think that there was already plans for them in April? This would have been after WrestleMania that year, that Dragongate, after these LA shows, was going to look to have a more of a beachhead, if not DGUSA, some other sort of them doing these promotions out on the West Coast. Like, do you think that was already kind of, let's see how this show goes and then we'll go build on this in the future? Because I don't know. I kind of come down both sides on that. I wonder what you think about that.
I get the impression that, let's say Gabe had stayed with Ring of Honor, or Gabe, got fired from Ring of Honor and then took a consulting job in TNA, whatever it is, there would have been more Dragon Gate in the US shows, even without the existence of Dragon Gate USA. And I think they would have worked LA and gone in tandem with PWG. I think they would have worked Houston, where they had, a bit of a foundation there. And then they would have tried probably Chicago, New York, and some city in Florida. And they would have roughly tried to do what Dragon Gate USA did, at least initially, but with more of a Dragon Gate ethos, with more of a Dragon Gate mindset. The issue long-term, besides cost, obviously, which I don't know, it's weird. Like, I was trying to think about the world economy as I was watching this show, and what differences might have been there in the summer of 2008 compared to the summer of 2009 and beyond, because this is a show entirely made up of Dragon Gate guys. I think they would have flown in Pac directly from Japan, and maybe Generico, the Bucks, are local, but it's a show made up of a ton of Dragon Gate guys. And even within the first year of Dragon Gate USA, they would have shows without this many guys on it. And so I was going to say, well, okay, well, the partnership with Gabe and Sal makes sense because they can handle some of the financial stuff, but Gabe and Sal never had any money. So I don't know if that was beneficial to them or if that was an anchor to them in hindsight. I just really wish this wasn't the only Dragon Gate proper show in America that we ever got, because again, it felt so authentically Dragon Gate, and the things that made Dragon Gate what they were are things that Gabe, despite all of his talent, which he had plenty of, was never truly able to hone in on.
Yeah, and I guess like economy at that time, I mean, Great Recession. So
exactly, that's why I brought that up. Is I know there are changes in the economy and in terms of cash flow and in terms of plane tickets and whatever else, but I don't know. Dragon Gate seemed to do okay for the show, and it seemed like they were very happy with it, and the fans were certainly happy with it. And it, the first Dragon Gate USA show was objectively very cool, but I wish we had 10 more shows like the one in LA, rather than for 4 years after Open the Historic Gate, Gabe trying to chase that feeling in every market in America.
Yeah, and I feel like I wonder if at a certain time, like the overall kind of dichotomy that, as what I understand it as, the money issues would have popped up a lot sooner. I feel like if this was solely a Dragon Gate thing, because at a certain point, I mean, we talked about that like how how Dragon Gate USA started feeling less and less Dragon Gate, and there was less and less showing up there. If it was solely held up by Dragon Gate and maybe like promotional partners in the area, like PWG getting the cut for when it was in Los Angeles and what have you, I wonder if, like, just because of the general differences in Shimaism, frankly, and other people who would have the say in the company, that maybe that they try again with this. But also, like, at a time, this was not a time where Ring of Honor could have done Ring of Honor presents Dragon Gate Pro Wrestling. That just was not what the wrestling ecosystem was at that point.
No, so, I mean, in 2008 Ring of Honor, I mean, Kerry's actively trying to get them on TV. He's not interested at that point in a niche boutique product. Kerry wants to make money for the first time in 4 years, and he looks at Gabe as being the ultimate roadblock there because of Gabe's interest compared to his.
Yeah, no, and I mean, arguably, I don't know necessarily if Kerry was right.
Well, it goes back to the thing we talked about like 2 months ago, where Ring of Honor on HDNet is a fascinating rewatch because nobody ever talks about it.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of those guys are on national TV now, and no one ever talks about anything Ring of Honor HDNet.
No, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. But that was LA. I'm sorry, Friday LA Extreme Night from 2008. And boy, this was like, I know you kind of like sprung this on us, but I'm glad we did this.
I really wanted to do this one. I wanted to go back and watch this show. I didn't realize I was going to fall into just the 2008 wormhole that I did, but it's a great show. Mike, I'm going to send you the link right now. So again, that'll be in the episode description.
Absolutely.
And the Discord when the episode goes up. It's a super fun show. I really recommend spending some time with it. Easy. I mean, it's an hour and 40 minutes, and there's 3 matches that I went notebook on. You know, Shingo Park and Bucks and Saito and Susumu, and then the main event I went 4 stars on. So it's a fantastic watch.
Yeah, and it's really 2 hours. You get all the way through it. Contrary to how their commentary was in PWG at the time, Excalibur and Disco Machine, they have a reference there, and it's really worth going out of your way to go see. That's not going to be the only rewind and rewatch we have this month. As Case mentioned, we'll be covering the Dragon Kid versus Darkness Dragon feud later on this month before we wrap up. We previewed Corkin last week, right?
Yes. So we'll have the Corkin review next Tuesday.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for us this week on Open the Voice Gate. Thanks for everyone for stopping by. You could follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. You can hang out in the Voices of Wrestling Discord. I'm certain as soon as everyone watches the show, there's going to be a lot of fun discourse there, either in the Open the Voice Gate channel or in the Dragongate channel as well. It's quite simply the most fun place I think we have on the internet to talk Dragongate, I feel like, guys.
Very much so. I completely agree.
But you could follow us again on Twitter, cases at _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. Thanks for listening to Open Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week talking about Ishin versus Yamato for Open the Dreamgate title. Gold Class versus Z-Brats colliding after the events of Dangerous Gate, and a whole lot more. Have a good rest of your week, everyone. Take care.
Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.